Hi, welcome to Detours, Understanding Acquired Brain Injury. Today I want to talk about disinhibition and impulse control disorders that are typically associated with traumatic brain injury. When we talk about changes in personality that's often seen with traumatic brain injury, many times this is what family, friends, and survivors are talking about. Problems controlling impulsive behavior, as well as spontaneous aggression for a reason they can't find. Many survivors and family members will report that as well, or sexual disinhibition too. So, what is disinhibition? What are we describing? What we're describing is the inability to re- restrain or constrain behavior. We're talking about like divulging personal information to strangers or to people who are acquaintances. We're talking about sharing private family information. We're talking about rapidly becoming familiar with an acquaintance or somebody we don't know and just emotionally or physically, sexually becoming too close too soon. We're talking about becoming angry for no known reason, just exploding about something. It's these lack of filters. And we see this not just in traumatic brain injury, but in a number of other disorders. We see this in frontotemporal dementia. We see this in Alzheimer's disease. We see this in Huntington's disease. We see this in a lot of the other frontal disorders. We see this in anterior communicating artery strokes, arteriovenous malformations, cardiac arrest for an extended period of time. We'll see this kind of behavior too. But the problem with some of those disorders is that it's more widespread, and so it's more difficult to identify because they have so many other complications. But I do want to talk about the neuroanatomy, what's going on where, the mechanics, because it's more complicated than simply being an affective or social problem. There are specific regions involved in different types. And I want to talk about why this is so common. This is very common in traumatic brain injury survivors, and there's a reason for that. And then I want to talk about a few of the things you can do to help mitigate these kind of problems. While keeping in mind this is something that is rather difficult to treat and is one of the leading problems that leads to social isolation and that leads to difficulty with employment, difficulty with relationships, difficulty with the law quite often. Because if you're telling the cop if you've been pulled over, hey, you should have seen me, I was doing 90 back there, and that's an example of disinhibition. Or if you're grabbing somebody on the bottom or something like that, or if you're exploding in rage and don't know why. Oftentimes this is due to problems filtering. And so let's take a look. There are two regions of the brain that are often involved. Even inappropriate language, saying something that's hurtful or offensive. Hey, mom, that lady's fat. The kids say that a lot, when they're like 5 or whatever, and they don't learn to control that inhibition. They don't learn to stop that inappropriate response till later. I've always joked that kids have brain damage, because they do sure as heck look a lot like a person with frontal lobe injury. And there's a good reason for that because, well, those areas of the brain are not fully yet developed. And so they resemble a person with frontal lobe injury. So let's talk about the different areas of the brain involved. First of all, you all know my old friend here. So first, this region of the brain, the left dorsolateral aspect, here it's reversed, but this region helps with planning. This is the area, we've talked about this before with executive function. This area helps us to make plans. And if we have problems with this, we'll have difficulty coming up with, hey, what to do next. And if we have problems here, we'll often have difficulty with deciding then what comes next and will appear disinhibited. So if you have problems with executive function, you'll often have trouble likewise coming up with those next steps, and it will look very disinhibited. You will be, because you can't take that next step. Also involved is deep inside. This is for both sides, but brain model sometimes. In here's the anterior cingulate. We've talked about this area before, and as far as how it represents modeling for other behaviors, but the anterior cingulate gives that corrective response, tells you, no, wait a minute, things are not unfolding as you've expected. We better make changes and make adjustments to your plan. It's you were going to go out tonight, you're going to go see a baseball game, football game, whatever. It's raining, it's snowing, maybe we better do something else. And so feedback from here, and this is bilateral, this is both sides of the brain, feedback and corrections, so that you can adjust. And problems here, no feedback, go straight on ahead. Hey, this person's attractive, go up to them, say, I want to buy you a drink or whatever. You get drink thrown in your face. Feedback, maybe this person's not interested, you better back off. This area's not working. Keep going, keep pursuing, get in trouble. Again, this necessary system for feedback. And if it's not working, and remember, this is on both sides, if it's not working, you're not getting the, hey, I better make adjustments, new plans, new ideas, self-correction, anterior cingulate. Finally, there is on the right side of the brain, down in here, this area is important, and it runs right along here. This gyrus is the part of the memory, sorry. Gyrus rectus. In this area down here, where you will get part of the ventromedial aspect, where you will get behaviors that that are unwanted, and the lack of inhibition that comes from here, the ventromedial aspect. And so this is where like many of the social rules are stored. This is also helps with inhibition of inappropriate responses, and it's the center that helps, we find based on some of the research, with judging what is risky behavior. That tells you, no, you shouldn't do that, that's high risk, that may put you in danger. And if this area is damaged, you'll find people with brain injury taking much more risky behavior because they don't have the ability to gauge risks. So that is what this area does. It helps you judge risk, as well as kind of acts like the inhibitor of inappropriate response, probably related to that function of judging what is risky. Now, there's a reason why oftentimes that those areas, especially that area, the ventromedial or orbitofrontal cortex, is damaged. And that has to do with the anatomy of the human skull. These wings, they're called the sphenoid wings, are very often damaged, or very often do the damaging. They act like a cheese grater. They're sharp edged, and they will literally scrape on the inside of your brain, will scrape the ventromedial frontal cortex and do damage to those very areas you need to inhibit impulsive behavior and inappropriate behavior. This is why the amount of damage in that area is so frequently seen in traumatic brain injury, car accidents, whatever. it damages those areas. So that's just an unfortunate effect of our anatomy. Also, what's interesting is the temporal pole here. Damage here seems to be associated with, based on research, a verbal lack of inhibition, a verbal impulsiveness, saying inappropriate stuff, cursing, yelling, that kind of stuff. This area in the temporal lobe seems to have connections like that. And so we find, especially on the right side, again, the right frontal lobe seems to be connected, and the right temporal area seems to be connected with emotional regulation. That's what we found through research, neuropsychiatric, neuropsychological research. And so it kind of isn't a surprise to find that this is mostly on the right hemisphere, right ventromedial area, which I just showed you, and damage there. So, and so these are the areas that are associated with damage. So the ventromedial area on the right side here inhibits inappropriate responses. Okay, the emotional and social and motor responses, and also helps judge risk. And failure here, damage here, will lead to riskier behavior and lack of inhibition of inappropriate responses. Then here, dorsolateral, left region of your brain. This area helps with planning and thinking ahead. Damage here makes it hard to come up with a plan, think ahead. Finally, the anterior cingulate, this area here, helps you adjust behavior if things are going wrong, if you're failing, if things are not working, telling dorsolateral aspect of your brain, better do something else. Obviously, there are white matter tracts deeper in, and damage to those areas will prevent communications to these different regions, and damage to that will have similar effects. All right, great. So now we know about the neuroanatomy and what the different regions are believed to do based on imaging studies and neuropsychological studies. So what do you do? That's difficult. One of the things that can be done is in what's called ABC analysis, anterior or analytical behavioral analysis, ABA studies. So basically what you're doing is you're looking at what behaviors come first, what the behavior is, and then trying to intervene before the behavior becomes a problem. And so you're taking notes, recording what's happening, and then you're trying to intervene. Also, you make sure you reinforce those behaviors, classic behaviorism again, reinforce those behaviors which are appropriate, and that you take away attention or remove rewards which are reinforcing of negative behavior. So again, classic Skinner. And you try to prevent situations where inappropriate behavior occurs. Also, certain medications, stimulant medications, like you would administer to somebody with ADD, ADHD, I take it, helps, like as I said, like Concerta or something like that, helps, because it helps with the executive left frontal injury, helps improve focus, so you can improve attention and focus with that, and so you can improve your planning abilities, also important. Also, explain. Family members, friends, explain what's going on. Tell them, let them know it's not intentional. It's not meant to hurt somebody. Honestly, that's really important. Carry one of those TBI cards. One of those cards that explains, what's going on, what your symptoms are. Be honest. Tell people what you have. Apologize, then move forward. I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to hurt feelings. If you hurt or say something. Avoid situations that are really high risk. Avoid alcohol, drugs that affect inhibition, disinhibition. Really important to try that. And out of those high risk kind of situations. And proper trainings in social situation with family members, friends, therapists, social retraining. those are the kind of things you can do. Unfortunately, this is one of the most devastating types of injuries, and it's incredibly common to make matters worse. Obviously, it can range from very minor to severely disabling. And if there are no attempts are made to address it, there are no attempts to reinforce appropriate behavior, withdraw reward for inappropriate behavior, no attempts are made, it can lead to a lot of legal issues, and it can lead to social isolation, problems with employment, and all that, as I said. And it is one of the most noticeable changes in behavior, personality. And so just one of those things that we have to address as it comes and deal with it step by step. So I just wanted to address this rather significant frontal lobe symptom. And so please, look at some of our other videos. I address other executive and emotional and behavioral issues on my channel here. So please click like and subscribe, and I will talk about other symptoms that you see with traumatic brain injury. Some not quite as striking, but some definitely that do have a similar effect on social, emotional, and cognitive life of a person with traumatic brain injury. Have a good day.